Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring a really fascinating concept, and that is the power of faith.
Hmm.
And we're going to be looking at it in a slightly different light than perhaps the typical religious context you might think of.
Yeah, definitely.
And to help us unpack all this, we have an expert joining us.
Oh,
Thanks so much for being here. Now, to get started,
sure.
we're going to be turning to the works of Allan Kardec.
A very influential thinker.
I've heard the name,
Mhm.
but to be honest, I'm not super familiar with his work. Could you give us a little background on who he was and why he's relevant to our discussion today?
Of course. Yeah. So Allan Kardec was a 19th century educator, and he's actually considered to be the founder of Spiritism.
Spiritism. Okay, I'm definitely intrigued, but also a little lost.
Yeah.
What exactly is Spiritism?
Well, in essence, Spiritism is a philosophy, a doctrine, if you will, that combines elements of Christianity with science and spiritualism.
Okay, so it's a sort of blend of different ideas, and I guess that's where the concept of faith comes in.
Exactly. Kardec saw faith as a bridge between the spiritual world and the physical world.
Interesting. And how did his views on faith differ from the more traditional religious interpretations?
Well, he believed that faith wasn't just about blind belief or accepting things without question. For him, faith was an active force, a power that could shape reality.
Okay, so it's not just about believing, it's about doing something with that belief.
Right. He drew on a lot of examples from the Bible to illustrate this point.
Oh, really? Like what?
We'll take the passage in Matthew where Jesus talks about faith being able to move mountains.
Okay, I always love that one. But I got to be honest, I haven't seen any mountains moving lately.
Haha,
Yeah.
right. But you see, Kardec believed these mountains weren't meant to be taken literally. He saw them as metaphors for the challenges we face in life. Fear, self-doubt, limiting beliefs.
Okay, so it's more about moving those internal mountains that hold us back.
Precisely. It's about having faith in ourselves, in our goals, and in something larger than ourselves.
So it's about more than just believing in something. It's about believing that you can make a difference, that you have the power to create change.
Exactly. It's about tapping into a force within ourselves and in the universe that can help us overcome obstacles and achieve what might seem impossible.
So it's not just about having faith. It's about harnessing that faith and using it as a tool to shape our reality.
I like that. It's about realizing that faith is a force for change.
Now, I know that Kardec also uses the parable of the fig tree to talk about faith. What's the significance of that story?
Oh yes, the fig tree. It's a powerful metaphor for those who have the potential to do great things but remain stagnant.
Like a tree with lots of leaves but no fruit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's talking about those times when we let fear or self-doubt hold us back from taking action.
I think we've all had those fig tree moments where we let an opportunity pass us by because we weren't sure if we could do it.
Absolutely. But Kardec's message is one of empowerment. He's saying we have a choice to remain stuck like that fig tree or to step into our potential and make a difference.
So it's about realizing that we have the power to choose faith over fear, action, over inaction.
And that's where the real transformation begins.
That's powerful. But when we talk about faith, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking about it as just blind belief. But I know Kardec makes a distinction between blind faith and rational faith.
Yes, he does. And it's a crucial distinction.
So what's the difference?
Well, he believed that blind faith, accepting things without question, could lead to fanaticism.
Right. It's like just following blindly without really understanding why.
Exactly. Rational faith, on the other hand, embraces critical thinking.
So it's about seeking understanding, questioning, testing our beliefs.
It's about using our intellect to arrive at a deeper, more informed kind of faith.
So it's not about shutting down our brains. It's about using them to strengthen our faith.
That's a great way to put it.
So we're talking about a more active, engaged approach to faith where we're constantly seeking understanding and growth.
Precisely. It's a journey, not a destination.
It sounds like he's encouraging us to become active participants in our own spiritual development.
Exactly. And to realize that faith is a powerful tool for transformation.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. I'm already starting to see faith in a whole new light.
I'm glad to hear that.
But now I'm even more curious about how we actually put all of this into practice. How do we cultivate and strengthen these different forms of faith in our daily lives?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one we'll delve into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks. We're just getting started. All right, so we're back and ready to dive even deeper into this idea of faith as a force for change.
Right. Yeah.
But now I'm curious about how we actually put all this into practice.
Yeah.
How do we go from theory to reality? How do we actually cultivate and strengthen those different forms of faith in our everyday lives?
That's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with
Yeah.
because it's one thing to understand it intellectually, but then it's another thing to actually embody it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start with human faith, that belief in ourselves and our abilities. Where do we even begin with that?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to start paying attention to our thoughts.
Our thoughts.
Yeah, because so often we have these negative thought patterns that can really sabotage us.
You mean like that inner critic that's always telling us we're not good enough or we can't do something?
Exactly. And the thing is, those thoughts, they're not always true.
Right.
They're often based on fear or past experiences that might not even be relevant anymore.
So it's like we're holding ourselves back based on these limiting beliefs.
Exactly. So one practical tip is to start challenging those negative thoughts whenever they come up.
Challenge them. How do we do that?
Well, first you have to become aware of them.
Yeah.
Notice when they pop up.
Okay. So like catch yourself in the act of negative thinking.
Yes. And then once you're aware of them, you can start to question them. Is this thought really true? Is it helpful? Or is it just based on fear?
So it's about sort of putting those thoughts on trial and seeing if they actually hold up under scrutiny.
Exactly. And then if they don't, you can start to replace them with more positive and empowering thoughts.
So instead of saying, I can't do this, you might say, I'm capable of learning and growing, or I'm willing to give this my best shot.
Right. It's about shifting your mindset from a place of limitation to a place of possibility.
So it's like we're retraining our brains to believe in ourselves.
Exactly. And the more you do this, the stronger your belief in yourself will become.
Okay, so it's not just about thinking positive thoughts, it's about actually believing them.
Right. And that's where action comes in.
Action. So it's not enough to just sit around and think positive thoughts. We have to actually do something with them.
Exactly. Because action is what builds confidence.
Okay, so how do we take action in a way that supports this belief in ourselves?
Well, one thing you can do is break down big goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Well, I like that because sometimes those big goals can feel really overwhelming.
Absolutely. So by breaking them down into smaller steps, you make them less daunting, and you give yourself a sense of accomplishment along the way.
So it's like you're building momentum with each small win.
Right. And that momentum can really fuel your belief in yourself.
So it's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant?
Ha ha ha. Yes. One bite at a time.
And each bite, each small step you take brings you closer to your goal and strengthens your faith in your ability to achieve it.
Exactly. And as you start to see yourself succeeding, even in those small steps, your faith in yourself will naturally grow stronger.
So it's like a positive feedback loop.
Right. You take action, you see results, you feel more confident, and that confidence fuels more action.
It's like this upward spiral of faith and action.
I love that.
So it's really about taking those small, consistent steps and trusting that they will lead you in the right direction.
And I think that's a really important point because faith is not about having all the answers or knowing exactly how things are going to unfold.
So it's not about having a crystal ball and seeing the future.
Right. It's about trusting that even if you don't know the way of the ship, you'll figure it out as you go.
It's like having faith in the journey, even when you don't know the destination.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think that's where the connection to something larger than ourselves comes in.
Yes, that divine faith we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Because when you have faith in something bigger than yourself, whether you call it God, the universe, or whatever resonates with you, you tap into a source of strength and support that can carry you through those times when you might feel lost or uncertain.
So it's like having an invisible safety net.
Right. It's knowing that even if you stumble, you're not going to fall too far because something is there to catch you.
And that can be incredibly empowering because it frees us from the need to control everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when we trust that something bigger than ourselves is guiding us, we can let go of that fear of making mistakes or failing.
It's about surrendering to the flow of life and trusting that you're being led in the right direction.
So cultivating both human and divine faith is really about finding that balance between action and surrender. It's about recognizing that we have the power to create change in our lives, but also that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot between effort and grace.
Okay, so we've talked about cultivating faith in ourselves and faith in something larger, but what about that collective faith? The power of believing in something together.
Well, this is where things get really interesting because Kardec believed that when people come together with a shared intention and a strong belief in their ability to achieve something, they create a force that's far greater than the sum of its parts.
So it's like that saying, two heads are better than one.
Yeah, but on a much larger scale.
Right. We're talking about the power of communities, movements, even entire nations coming together with a shared sense of purpose and belief.
Think about those moments in history when people have united to overcome seemingly impossible odds, social movements, scientific breakthroughs, artistic revolutions. All of these were fueled by a collective faith, a belief that together they could make a difference.
So it's not just about individual faith, it's about tapping into that wellspring of collective power.
Exactly. And this is what Kardec envisioned, a world where people come together not in blind uniformity, but in a spirit of unity and collaboration.
So not about everyone thinking the same thing, but about everyone working together towards a common goal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and using our diverse talents and perspectives to create a better world.
It's like a tapestry woven together from all these different threads.
And each thread, each individual contributes to the beauty and strength of the whole.
Now, this is all incredibly inspiring. But let's be real, cultivating this kind of collective faith, especially in a world that often feels so divided, can be a real challenge.
Definitely.
So how do we start to bridge those divides and build that sense of unity?
That's the question we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about cultivating faith on a personal level and connecting to something larger. But in a world that often feels, well, kind of divided and fractured, like you were saying, how do we bridge those gaps and start to cultivate that collective faith that Kardec talks about?
That's the big question, right? How do we move from me to we?
Yeah, exactly. Where do we even begin? Especially when it seems like everywhere you turn, people are disagreeing and arguing and just, stuck in their own echo chambers.
I think it starts by remembering that at our core, we're all more alike than we are different.
So finding that common ground.
Exactly. I mean, we all want to be happy, right? We all want to feel safe and loved and connected. We all want a world that's peaceful and just.
Okay, so focusing on those shared desires, those universal human needs that connect us all, regardless of our backgrounds or beliefs.
Right. It's about remembering that we're all part of the same human family, even when we disagree with each other.
Okay, that makes sense. But in practice, I think it can be really hard to actually put that into action.
Oh, absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in our own opinions and judgments and forget to see the humanity in those who hold different views.
Yeah, we all have those moments.
So how do we move beyond those judgments? How do we approach those conversations with people who see the world differently than we do in a way that's constructive and open-minded?
I think the key is to approach those conversations with a sense of curiosity rather than judgment.
Curiosity.
Yeah, instead of trying to convince someone that you're right, try to understand why they believe what they believe.
So listening to understand, not to respond.
Exactly. It's about cultivating empathy.
Empathy.
Yeah, that ability to really step into someone else's shoes and see the world through their eyes. Even if you don't agree with them, you can still try to understand their perspective.
Okay, so it's about recognizing that everyone's coming from their own unique experiences and that those experiences shape their beliefs.
Right. And once you start to see things from that perspective, it becomes a lot easier to have those difficult conversations without getting defensive or judgmental.
So it's about shifting from a place of I'm right and you're wrong to a place of let's try to understand each other.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important step in building that collective faith.
Because if we can't even have a civil conversation with someone who disagrees with us, how can we possibly work together towards a common goal?
It's like trying to build a house without any foundation.
Yeah, you need that solid base of understanding and respect to build upon.
And I think once you have that foundation, then you can start to look for those areas where your goals align, even if your beliefs differ.
So finding those common threads that connect us.
Exactly. Despite all our differences, there are so many challenges that we face as a global community. Climate change, poverty, social injustice, these are issues that affect us all, regardless of our background or belief.
Right. Those are things that we all have a stake in.
Exactly. And when we focus on those shared goals, it can help us to move beyond our differences and start working together towards solutions.
So it's about shifting from a mindset of scarcity and competition to a mindset of abundance and cooperation.
Yes. It's about realizing that we're all in this together and that by working together, we can achieve so much more than we ever could alone.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of finding common ground, cultivating empathy, and focusing on shared goals. But how do we actually translate all of this into real-world action? How do we move from talking about collective faith to actually experiencing it?
Well, I think it starts with each of us taking responsibility for our own thoughts, actions, and intentions, being the change we want to see in the world.
So like that Gandhi quote, be the change.
Exactly. It's about making a conscious effort to cultivate those qualities of empathy, understanding, and compassion in our own lives.
Okay, so leading by example.
Right. And then as we embody those qualities, we start to radiate them outwards into the world around us.
And maybe those ripples of positive energy will inspire others to do the same.
That's the hope. It's like that saying, a single candle can light 1,000 others.
So it's not about waiting for someone else to create a better world. It's
Yeah.
about each of us doing our part to make a difference.
And I think that's really what Kardec's message is all about. He believed that we all have the power within us to create a more just compassionate and harmonious world.
It's about tapping into that power and using it to make a positive impact.
And it's about having faith not just in ourselves, but in each other and in our collective ability to create a brighter future for all.
Well said. This has been an incredible journey exploring the many facets of faith and its power to transform not just our individual lives, but also the world around us.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope that this deep dive has inspired you to cultivate your own faith, to connect with something larger than yourself, and to believe in the power of humanity to create a more loving and just world for all. Thank you for joining us.